You get to a certain age and you think you've seen it all, that nothing can surprise you, not after wars, weddings, and 3 decades in the Detroit auto plants. Christmas morning was always sacred to me, no matter where life took us. This year, I was looking forward to sharing it with my only daughter, her new husband, and his parents. I'd poured myself into making it perfect, even booked a luxury ski trip to Lake Tahoe, a 7-day escape from Michigan's flat gray cold, meant for family to reconnect. I woke early, as I always do. I expected the familiar sizzle of bacon, maybe a flash of red from the ribbon on the presents I'd stacked under the tree. Instead, I was met with silence. That heavy, echoing quiet you only notice when you live alone. I shuffled into the kitchen, already imagining my granddaughter, Amy, laughing as she tore into wrapping paper. Instead, there was just a piece of paper, folded with the kind of care you only use when you're trying to break bad news gently. My name was written across the front. Grandpa Ed. I sat down at the table, my place at the head, still set from last night's dinner, and unfolded the note. The handwriting was neat, definitely Madison's. It said, "Grandpa, we decided to go to California for the holidays. We all need some time together, just us. Please don't worry about the money, you're always so generous. Thank you for everything. We'll see you January 2nd. Love, Madison." My heart sank. No laughter, no clattering plates. Just that note and the hum of the refrigerator. I checked every room, calling out, "Madison? Carter? Mrs. Brooks?" But each door was open, the beds half made, closets ransacked for suitcases. The house was empty except for me and the ghosts of holiday mornings past. I tried calling Madison first. Straight to voicemail. Carter's phone rang once and then cut off. Even his parents, Tom and Linda, who'd always been so polite to my face, didn't pick up. Every unanswered call made the silence heavier. It was then I saw the car keys, my Buick spare set, sitting untouched by the door. They hadn't even taken my car to the airport. They'd ordered a rideshare, making sure I'd have no way to follow or interrupt. I sat in my old lazy boy, staring at the family photo from last year, smiles that now seemed staged, Madison's arm around my shoulder, Carter with his nervous grin, Tom and Linda looking every bit the classic Midwestern couple. I thought about all the years I'd worked overtime, skipped vacations, and said yes to every request, just to make sure Madison never had to struggle the way I did. 3 months earlier, I'd announced a Lake Tahoe trip over a Sunday dinner. Madison was still picking up the pieces after her divorce, and Carter's parents hadn't traveled in decades. I wanted to give them something none of us could ever forget. 7 days, all expenses paid, skiing, spas, fine dining. "Grandpa, you're amazing," Madison had said, hugging me. "This is exactly what our family needs." Now I wondered how long she'd been planning to leave me behind. The minutes after I read Madison's note stretched out, long and cold. It was still early, barely 7. The Christmas tree blinked in the corner, casting splinters of colored light on a pile of presents with names like, "To Carter from Grandpa Ed," and, "To Amy, love Grandpa." I'd spent hours wrapping those, thinking about the looks on their faces when they opened each one. I stared at the fireplace, where Madison had hung our family stockings just last night, not knowing she'd be gone before sunrise. The phone buzzed on the table. It was my neighbor, old Pete. "Merry Christmas, Ed. Hope you're having a great morning with the family." I didn't answer. What would I say? That my family had vanished without a word except a note saying, "Don't worry about the money." I sat in the quiet and replayed the last few months in my mind. That vacation, 7 days in Lake Tahoe, was supposed to be our fresh start. After Madison's tough year, I wanted to bring everyone together. She'd raved about the plan, even talked up the idea with Carter's folks over dinner one Sunday. "You deserve a real vacation, Grandpa. We all do." I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But now, sitting with the note in my hand, I remembered little things, whispered conversations between Madison and Carter, Tom glancing at me with tight smiles, Linda keeping her phone just out of sight. They must have planned this for weeks. Maybe months. They'd waited until the house was decorated, the trip paid in full, and all the details settled before deciding to leave me behind. I moved through the house on autopilot. Madison's bedroom was empty but for a few hangers swinging in the closet. Amy's favorite stuffed bunny was gone from the guest room. Carter's fancy electric toothbrush was missing from the bathroom counter. Even the pile of matching ski jackets I'd bought for everyone was gone. They'd taken everything that mattered, and left me with silence. I made coffee, more out of habit than hunger, and forced myself to sit at the kitchen table. The receipt folder for the trip was in the drawer, every reservation, every deposit, each activity I'd booked for them. I stared at the big red total, $18,200. I'd saved for months to make it possible. This was supposed to be my gift, my legacy. Now, it was just a number on a page. Finally, I picked up the phone and called the Lake Tahoe Resort. My hand shook as I punched in the number. A woman answered, cheerful and professional. "Thank you for calling Crystal Pines Lodge. How can I help you? This is Ed Walker. My family checked in last night under my reservation. I need to make some changes." "Oh, Mr. Walker. Your family seemed very excited when they arrived. What can we help you with?" I took a breath. "I'd like to cancel all the spa appointments, the chef's dinner, the ski lessons, the wine tour, everything that's not the basic room." She hesitated. "Sir, those are premium bookings. Canceling will incur charges, especially this late." "Cancel everything. Remove my credit card from the extras. Let them pay for their own fun from now on." There was a pause, and I imagined her face as she realized what was happening. "Of course, Mr. Walker. I'll process those cancellations right away." I hung up and felt a strange sense of peace. For once, I wasn't the one cleaning up someone else's mess. I was simply stopping the bleeding. I went to my study, opened the big metal filing cabinet, and pulled out the manila folder labeled Family Support. Inside were years of records: college tuition payments for Madison, car loans for Carter, help with Amy's medical bills, every birthday check and emergency loan. Line after line, my generosity stared back at me. It was all there: $190,000 from Madison's degree at Northwestern, $70,000 for her wedding to her first husband, $60,000 for the down payment on Carter and Madison's house, $55,000 in smaller checks, gifts, and monthly help for groceries or bills. I realized, as I counted up every dollar, that what hurt wasn't the money. It was that they'd never once asked how I felt about being left behind. They'd assumed I'd keep giving, no matter what. That I'd always be the old man with an open wallet, grateful just for a seat at their table. Maybe that was my real mistake, making it all seem too easy. I stared out the frosted kitchen window, watching snow drift over the street. My house, once so full of laughter, felt bigger and emptier than ever. I didn't know what came next, but I was done pretending nothing had changed. By noon, I had finished my coffee and forced myself to eat a piece of cold toast, the kind Madison would have thrown away without a second thought. My phone sat heavy in my hand. I'd left a voicemail for Madison, just a quiet, "Please call me back. I found your note. I need to understand what's going on." She didn't call. Instead, I heard from my lawyer, Bill Sanders. Bill had handled my retirement, my estate planning, even the sale of the house after my wife, Ruth, passed away. He was a steady voice, never judgmental. "Ed, is everything all right? It's Christmas. Didn't expect to hear from you." "No, Bill, it's not all right. My family left me this morning, went to California without me, on my dime. I want to know my options." Bill whistled low. "Ed, I'm sorry. Want me to look at those loans we drew up for Madison and Carter? Exactly. Especially the house note. Can I call it back? You absolutely can. I'll draft the paperwork first thing tomorrow. I hung up and wandered through the house again. I ended up in Madison's old room, now Amy's when she visited. Her childhood trophies lined the shelf: spelling bees, track medals, a yellowing photo from our first trip to the Grand Canyon. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking for any clue. On the nightstand, Madison's old phone blinked with a single notification. I knew it was a breach of privacy, but after what they'd done, I justified it to myself. Her password was still her high school graduation year, easy to guess. I unlocked it and opened the first app that popped up: Messages. At the top, a group chat titled, Family Vacation Plans. I scrolled. The truth unraveled in a handful of taps. 2 weeks ago. Madison, Grandpa insists on coming to Tahoe. Carter says maybe we could convince him to stay home. Linda, he paid, didn't he? Can't you just let him come? Carter, you don't know my dad. He'll turn every dinner into a lecture about saving money or being grateful. Tom, Madison, he's your father. Don't you feel a little guilty? Madison, of course I do. But I just want one trip where I don't have to say thank you every 5 minutes. Where I can relax. Amy, I'll miss Grandpa. But it will be less stressful without him. That last line hit me hard. I'd always thought Amy looked forward to my stories and corny jokes. Maybe she did once. Maybe she was just growing up. I scrolled further. 3 days before Christmas. Carter, everyone has their tickets? Madison, yup. Bags are packed. Grandpa's still convinced he's coming. I'll leave him a note. Linda, it feels cruel, Maddie. Madison, he'll be fine. He loves quiet mornings. This way we all get what we want. I sat back, numb. The group chat was a punch in the gut, every line proof they'd planned to leave me out, not just at the last minute, but from the start. A new message appeared as I watched. Madison, everyone, Grandpa's calling. Ignore it. Carter, don't answer. He'll get over it. Linda, I still feel wrong about this. Tom, we already made our choice. I locked the phone and set it down gently, as if it were a bomb. My love for Madison hadn't changed, but something else had, a sense of finality, maybe, or just the realization that the years I'd spent giving had bought me nothing but a seat on the outside. I went back to my study. This time, I didn't just look at the loan documents. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet. Years in the auto plants had made me meticulous. I tracked every tuition check, every rent payment, every gift I'd handed out since Ruth died. Northwestern tuition, $190,000. Wedding expenses, $70,000. House down payment, $60,000. Medical help for Amy, $15,000. Car for Carter, $24,000. Monthly support, $55,000. Christmas vacation, now wasted $18,200. The total stared back at me. Over $400,000, the price of a lifetime's devotion, and I was still alone. I emailed Bill. Draft the recall notice for the house loan. Cancel the credit cards. Let's get this started. Then, for the first time in hours, I turned on the television. Not for comfort, but for noise, to drown out the sound of my own regret. The TV did nothing to distract me. The morning news talked about families gathering, kids opening presents, new beginnings. I muted it after a while. I'd spent so much of my life trying to make sure Madison never felt alone. Now, in this big, empty house, I understood what loneliness really meant. Sometime in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was Bill, my lawyer. Ed, I have the paperwork ready to call in the house loan and cancel the cards. Are you sure about this? I've never been more certain, Bill. They made their decision. Now it's my turn. You want me to email everything? No. Bring it over tomorrow. I want to sign in person. I hung up, feeling oddly calm. After decades of cleaning up other people's messes, I was finally drawing a line. I walked through the house, collecting reminders of a family I thought I understood, a graduation cap, wedding photos, the miniature wooden train set I'd built for Amy when she was 5. Each object was evidence of love, of effort, and of all the quiet ways I'd shown up, day after day, year after year. I set the objects on the kitchen table and sat down with a yellow notepad. I wrote a letter to Madison. Madison, I found your note. I want you to know that I understand you made a choice to put your needs above the promises we made as a family. I'm not angry, but I am disappointed. I've spent my life giving so you could have more than I ever dreamed of. I did it out of love, not obligation. But love isn't a one-way street. Family isn't just about money, or gifts, or who pays for what. It's about respect and honesty. You planned your trip without me. That was your right. But you accepted my gift and then shut me out. That was a betrayal. I'm calling in the loan for the house. You and Carter have 30 days. The credit cards are canceled. Any money I gave you as a loan will be repaid, as agreed. I hope you use this chance to learn what I already know, that the real currency of family is trust. Love. Dad. I set the letter aside, not sure if I'd send it. Maybe Madison would call, or maybe she'd show up at my door, apologetic, arms full of regret. But as evening came, the only sound was the clock ticking in the hallway and the wind rattling the old storm windows. Around 8, I checked my email. There were a handful of new messages, one from Bill with the official documents, and another, surprisingly, from Carter. The subject line was short. Please. The message itself was even shorter. Ed, let's talk before you do something you can't undo. I know you're upset. We all are. But families don't have to go nuclear over one mistake. Let's meet and talk this out. Carter. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to reply, to accept some explanation, to be the peacemaker I'd always been. But that part felt smaller than it used to. After all, Carter had been part of the plan. He'd encouraged Madison. He'd convinced his parents. It was all right there in the group chat. I replied with a single sentence. You made your choices, Carter. I'm simply living with the consequences. Ed? It felt strange, cold maybe, but honest. I'd spent too long putting everyone else's comfort ahead of my own. Night fell quickly. I reheated some soup and stood at the kitchen window, watching the snow pile up on the drive. I thought of Ruth, of how she'd shake her head and say, You always give too much, Ed. One day, you'll need to hold something back for yourself. She'd been right, of course. I just hadn't learned how until it was almost too late. By the time I went to bed, I'd made my own New Year's resolution: no more paying for love. No more buying my way into a family that didn't want me. I was done being the silent partner in my own life. That night, for the first time in years, I slept straight through until morning. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen table and landed on the pile of reminders: Madison's wedding photo, Amy's old soccer trophy, a faded Father's Day card. I felt a strange sense of peace as I poured myself a cup of coffee and read through Bill's email again. Everything was there: the house loan recall notice, the credit card closure paperwork, even a polite script for calling the bank. I printed it all out. The words on the page felt both foreign and final. 30 days. After that, if Madison and Carter couldn't pay back what they owed, the house would have to be sold. No more safety net. My phone rang mid-morning. It was Madison. Her number popped up, but my hands didn't shake this time. Dad, please don't do this. Carter told me you're calling in the loan, canceling the cards. I kept my voice steady. I'm following the contract you both signed, Madison. Nothing more, nothing less. She sniffed, already on the edge of tears. You're our father. This isn't what families do. I thought of the note she'd left on Christmas morning, the secret group chat, the years I'd spent quietly covering their tracks. Families don't leave each other behind for the holidays either. We're even. There was a long silence on the line. I could almost hear her mind racing, reaching for the right words. The perfect explanation. Dad, we made a mistake. Please, let's talk about this before you do something we all regret. We'll talk when you're ready to be honest, Madison. Not before. I hung up before I could change my mind. My heart was pounding, but it felt good to finally set a boundary. By noon, Bill stopped by with the paperwork. He didn't say much, just set the stack of documents on my kitchen table and offered a sympathetic pat on the shoulder. You're doing the right thing, Ed. This kind of betrayal can't just be ignored. Thanks, Bill. I just wish it hadn't come to this. He nodded. You're not alone, you know. Happens more than you'd think. You give, and eventually people forget it's not owed. That's when things get dangerous. After Bill left, I called the bank and explained the situation, using his script word for word. This is Ed Walker. Please remove Madison Walker and Carter Brooks from all accounts. Effective immediately. The customer service agent didn't ask questions. I suppose they'd heard it all before. When I was done, I opened the cabinet where Ruth used to keep the nice dishes. I pulled out 2 plates, set the table for one, and sat down with my lunch. There was something symbolic about it, acknowledging my solitude, facing it head-on instead of filling the house with noise and chaos that wasn't mine anymore. The day passed in a flurry of small tasks, shoveling the walk, sorting old mail, organizing the family photos into albums that I knew no one else would ever care about. It was lonely, yes, but it was a good kind of lonely. The kind that comes from making peace with your own decisions. That evening, Madison sent a text. We're coming home tomorrow. Please, can we talk? Don't do anything until we see you. Please. I didn't reply. I needed her to feel the weight of what she'd done, to know that some things can't be fixed with an apology or a hasty promise. Before bed, I wrote in my journal, something Ruth always encouraged me to do when my head was full of storms. Love doesn't mean you never say no. Sometimes it means you finally do. I went to sleep with the loan papers on my nightstand, a shield against the old habit of giving in. Madison, Carter, and their little family arrived home just after noon the next day. The snow was coming down steady now, covering the walkway I'd shoveled only an hour earlier. I watched from the living room window as Carter struggled with their bags and Madison kept her head down. Even Amy, bundled in a blue coat, seemed smaller than usual, weighed down by the tension. I opened the door before they could knock. Come in, I said and stepped aside. They shuffled inside, tracking snow across the entry rug. Carter stood stiff, Amy clung to Madison's sleeve. No one said a word for a long moment. Finally, Madison broke the silence. Dad, we're sorry. Really. This all just got out of control. I motioned them into the living room. The Christmas tree was still up, the presents untouched beneath its drooping branches. Carter sat on the edge of the couch. Madison hovered nearby, wringing her hands. I know we hurt you, Carter said, his tone halfway between defensive and ashamed. It wasn't the plan to just cut you out. We thought you'd enjoy some peace and quiet for once. You could have told me, I replied. You didn't have to take the trip I paid for, then leave me behind like an old piece of furniture. Amy's eyes brimmed with tears. I'm sorry, Grandpa. I didn't want to go, but Mom said it was for the best. I took a deep breath. Amy, none of this is your fault. You're just a kid caught in the middle. I looked at Madison and Carter. But you're not kids anymore. You made grown-up decisions. Now you get grown-up consequences. Madison sat down hard, as if the words had taken the wind from her. Please, Dad. Don't take our house. Amy needs stability. We just made a bad call. Can't we fix this? I handed her the loan recall notice and the closed credit card statements. I gave you a fair deal. 30 days. After that, the house goes on the market unless you pay me back. Carter's jaw tightened. So that's it? One mistake and you throw us out? One mistake? I said, my voice rising for the first time. It wasn't just the trip. It was years of acting like my help was your right, not my choice. You took and never thought about what it cost me. The room fell silent except for the sound of the old furnace kicking on in the basement. Amy reached into her backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, a drawing she'd made in Lake Tahoe, judging by the mountains. I drew this for you, Grandpa. I miss you. I took the picture, my heart twisting. Thank you, sweetheart. I miss you too. Madison wiped her eyes, her voice shaking. We'll figure something out, Dad. I just hope one day you can forgive us. I already do, I said quietly. But forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean going back to how things were. Carter looked away, staring out the window at the falling snow. We'll pay you back. Somehow. I hope you do, I answered, but this time, I didn't offer any help or comfort. I just let the silence sit between us. They stayed a little while longer, but there was nothing left to say. When they left, the house felt even emptier, but somehow, I felt lighter. That night, I sat by the tree, Amy's drawing in my lap, and thought about all the years I'd tried to buy love, when all I really wanted was respect. The days that followed were filled with a new kind of silence, one not just of absence, but of boundaries finally drawn. Madison and Carter stayed at their house, keeping to themselves. Amy texted me a few times, little messages that made my heart ache. Love you, Grandpa. Hope we can come over soon. I always wrote back. I love you too, Amy. My door is always open for you. But things between the adults stayed cold. Madison sent emails, lengthy, sometimes angry, sometimes pleading. She tried everything, logic, guilt, even nostalgia. Dad, remember when you helped me with my first car? Remember how you always told me family sticks together no matter what? Please, this isn't who we are. We made a mistake, but you can't just erase everything. I'd read her words late at night, but I didn't answer right away. Sometimes the hardest lesson a parent can teach is that actions have consequences, even when it hurts to enforce them. Carter, meanwhile, was less apologetic. A few days after the confrontation, he called me directly. You're really going to sell the house out from under your own daughter and granddaughter? He demanded, voice hard and cold. I stayed calm. Carter, you both signed the contract. I never wanted it to come to this, but I can't keep supporting people who don't respect me. You'll regret this, Ed. You're going to end up all alone. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the oldest threat in the book. Carter still thought loneliness was my greatest fear, but he didn't know that I'd already spent years feeling alone, even in a house full of people who only wanted what I could give them. The days crept by. I started sorting through old boxes, Ruth's recipe cards, faded photos, letters she wrote me back when we were courting. Sometimes I'd sit with a mug of coffee and just let the memories come, letting grief and relief take turns washing over me. It hurt, but it was honest hurt, not the dull ache of being used. The legal process moved ahead, slow but steady. Bill checked in every few days, letting me know the papers were filed, the 30-day clock ticking down. I called the bank and put the house up for sale, just in case. I didn't want to do it, but I knew I had to be prepared for any outcome. One snowy afternoon, Madison showed up on my doorstep, alone. She looked tired, older than her years. Dad, can I come in? I nodded, letting her into the kitchen. She sat at the table where she'd done her homework as a girl, twisting a napkin between her hands. "I've been thinking a lot," she started. "About everything. About you, Ma, Mamie, Carter. I don't know how we got here. Maybe I took too much for granted. Maybe I thought you'd always be there, no matter what." I didn't interrupt, just let her talk. "I'm not asking you to forget what we did. I want to find a way back. For Amy's sake, if not for mine." "She misses you so much." "I miss you too." I looked at her, saw the girl I'd raised, brilliant, stubborn, always a little too quick to assume life would bend her way. "You know, Madison, I never minded helping. I just wanted to feel like more than a wallet. Like you saw me as a person, not just a safety net." She reached for my hand. "I'm sorry, Dad. I see you. I really do. I just wish it hadn't taken losing everything to realize what I had." We sat for a long moment, just holding hands across the table. "I can't undo the past," I said. "But we can decide what comes next. That starts with honesty. And paying your debts." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "We'll find a way, Dad. I promise." She left quietly, and for the first time in weeks, hope flickered, small, but real, inside my chest. The last weeks of January crawled by with a cold, relentless wind blowing through Michigan. I kept busy, meeting with Bill to finalize the legal process, taking long walks to clear my head, and volunteering at the local Veterans Center where old friends never asked for anything except a good story and a warm handshake. My house grew tidier as I sorted through decades of family clutter, deciding what to keep and what to let go. But under the surface, the storm in my family still raged. Madison and Carter tried, at first, to gather the money for the loan. I saw the for sale sign go up on Carter's truck, heard from neighbors that they were quietly asking for odd jobs. Amy's texts grew shorter. "Miss you, Grandpa? Mom's tired a lot. Dad's stressed." I answered every message, careful not to put her in the middle, always ending with, "I love you, kiddo." The 30 days passed faster than any of us expected. On the morning of the deadline, Bill came over with a stack of documents. "They haven't paid, Ed. We have every legal right to move forward, but it's up to you. No judge in the state would fault you after all you've done." I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. "File it," I said. I gave them every chance. Word spread quickly. By evening, Carter was pounding on my door, fury in his eyes, his voice low and dangerous. "You think you're teaching us a lesson, old man? You're just proving what everyone already knew. You never cared about family, only about control." I stayed calm. "You don't get to rewrite history, Carter." I cared. I gave everything I had. "But you all made your choices." He shook his head, jaw clenched, then turned and stomped off into the night. Madison called late that night. She didn't beg, didn't bargain, she just sounded tired, defeated. "We're moving in with Carter's parents for now. Amy's upset, but I can't blame anyone but myself. I'm sorry, Dad. For everything. It hurt, but it was a clean hurt. I knew this was what needed to happen, even if it left scars." The following week, the house went up for sale. It wasn't easy, seeing the rooms empty out, the "For Sale" sign planted in the front yard where Amy had learned to ride her bike. Neighbors stopped by, some offering sympathy, others just curious. A few, quietly, told me they'd been through something similar, betrayed by those they'd loved most, forced to choose self-respect over keeping the peace. For the first time in years, I cooked for myself, real meals, not just sandwiches. I fixed the leaky faucet Ruth had always nagged me about, replaced a broken window pane in the den, started listening to jazz records in the evening instead of the news. I found that I didn't miss the chaos as much as I thought I would. Solitude, when chosen, is different than loneliness. One Saturday morning, Amy showed up on my doorstep with a small suitcase and a worried look. "Mom says it's okay if I stay with you for the weekend." Is that still all right, Grandpa? I smiled, stooped to hug her. It's more than all right, sweetheart. This is still your home. That weekend, we baked cookies, watched old cartoons, played Scrabble at the kitchen table. Amy never asked about the house or her parents' arguments. She just wanted to be a kid. At night, I tucked her into the spare bedroom, the one Madison had used as a girl, and kissed her forehead goodnight. As I sat in my quiet living room after she'd gone to sleep, I realized something. Life hadn't turned out how I'd planned, but it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. There was still love to give, forgiveness to find, and maybe, one day, a new kind of family to build, from the pieces that remained. Spring crept in slowly that year, the snow melting away in patches, little rivers forming along the curb in front of my house. The "For Sale" sign stood in the yard, but I'd stopped looking at it with regret. Instead, I found myself thinking about what would come next, where I might go, what kind of life I might build when the dust of all this family wreckage finally settled. Madison called me every week, sometimes just to talk, sometimes to vent about her new life squeezed into her in-laws' basement. There was no more anger in her voice, just weariness, a kind of humility I'd never heard before. Dad, we're managing. Amy's starting at her new school next month. Carter's picked up a couple jobs. I'm doing bookkeeping for a friend. I know things are different, but I want you to know I get it now. All those years you helped us. I didn't understand what it cost you. I thought it was endless. I'm sorry. Sometimes we'd sit on the phone in silence, neither of us sure what to say, both understanding that love, when it comes down to it, is measured by more than money. Amy visited when she could, filling the house with laughter again. We'd walk around the neighborhood, her chattering about new friends and science projects, me listening, grateful for the normalcy. I started going to church again, joined a senior bowling league, even signed up for a book club at the library. People asked me about my family, and I learned to tell the truth without bitterness. We had a tough year, but we're finding our way. Eventually, the house sold to a young couple expecting their first child. On the last day, I stood in the empty living room, hand on the wall where Ruth once hung her favorite painting. I said goodbye quietly, then locked the door one final time and left the keys with the realtor. My new apartment was small but filled with light, just a few blocks from a park and the local diner where some of the old guys from the plant still gathered. I put up a few family photos, Ruth's smile, Amy's kindergarten portrait, even one of Madison, grinning, covered in birthday cake as a little girl. Not to remind myself of what I'd lost, but of what I'd been blessed to have, even if only for a while. One afternoon, Madison came by, just her and Amy. She handed me an envelope, inside, the first payment toward the debt. It wasn't much, but it was honest. We're not asking for anything, Dad. I just want you to know we're serious about making things right. Even if it takes years. I hugged her for a long time. I never stopped loving you, Maddie. But I had to learn to love myself enough to say no. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I get that now. And I promise, I'll never take you for granted again. After they left, I sat on the balcony, the afternoon sun warming my face. For the first time in decades I felt free. Free from old obligations, from buying affection, from living for other people's happiness at the expense of my own. I started filling my days with things that made me feel alive again. I took a bus trip with my bowling buddies down to Nashville. I learned to make sourdough bread from a retired Navy cook in my building. I joined a group that volunteered at the animal shelter, and even let myself imagine, just a little, what it would be like to meet someone new, maybe go on a real date again. The past still hurt, sometimes. I miss Ruth deeply. I missed the illusion that my family could be fixed with money, with gifts, with endless forgiveness. But I also saw the beauty in what remained, a daughter learning accountability, a granddaughter who loved me for me, and a future where I didn't have to buy my place at the table. On Amy's birthday, Madison invited me to their new rental apartment. We ate cake on paper plates, and I watched Amy blow out the candles, her face shining with hope. When Madison handed me a fresh cup of coffee, our eyes met, and for a moment there was peace between us, a peace forged not by money, but by hard lessons learned. That night, back in my apartment, I wrote a new entry in my journal. Love given freely is the only kind that lasts. It's not measured in dollars, but in honesty, respect, and forgiveness. I am old enough to know the difference, and finally wise enough to choose it. The adventure, I realized, was still just beginning.